I'm Michael Murtaugh from the University of Minnesota. I'm a scientist who works on pig immunology and PRRS, and as a scientist I'm going to address technical issues. We're very good at providing answers to questions. The problem, especially when it comes to PRRS, is we don't usually know what the question is that we're providing the answer to. So one of the values of my being with you is that I expect to learn from you what the real questions are as compared to the questions I'm presenting. So it's easy to measure direct benefits of vaccination. There are any number of studies as shown by work done primarily at Boehringer-Ingelheim through Mike Roof, showing that if you use vaccine in a prevention paradigm where you provide protection and then challenge, you see a benefit. And the benefit here that they're looking at is reduction in lung lesion scores in young pigs. My role here is to talk about indirect benefits, and we don't have very much in the way of specific examples that demonstrate indirect benefits. Jean-Paul showed data from this study that he and Scott D. did, where, and here it's a therapeutic application in the face of infection, in this case with the mildly virulent PRRS virus. If you vaccinate, again, following infection, and here we show no vaccination at all, you still have shedding at 120 days. If you vaccinate 1, 2, or 3 times, you reduce the duration of shedding. This is consistent with the idea that there's a reduction in the total amount of virus available in the environment in this case being infected pigs. So this represents an indirect benefit. So as we move forward with regional elimination and control projects, one of the questions we would like to answer is if there is an indirect benefit in reducing the frequency of PRRS outbreaks in what I call the environmental virus load, so that the infection pressure in a region is reduced. It might be hard to measure on an individual farm basis, but do you get a benefit that is more than the sum of the parts by trying to control and eliminate PRRS virus? Going forward, the question will be, and the challenge is, how can we measure and document that potential reduction in environmental load? We have tools to do that. Primarily, in my opinion, large volume air sampling collection, either in designated locations in the region or outside of the exhaust fans from farms, measuring the amount of virus in the air that's spreadable and transmissible to other pigs. Scott D. is doing some of that research right now. I think there's opportunity to apply that as a potential assessment and monitoring protocol in eradication programs. The second example of an indirect benefit is to reduce the complexity of viral genotypes and genetics, the types of viruses within an area. It's my impression, and I think this is an anecdotal observation that other people have made as well, is that PRRS problems seem to be worse with the larger abundance of virus types you have. Systems or farms with a single PRRS virus seem to be better able to control the PRRS situation than farms in a region with a diversity of virus types spanning a lot of genetic diversity and potential challenges in immunological cross-protection. Here is an example of PRRS virus being applied in a system, vaccine being applied in a system, and in the first period of 150 to 270 days, there were 5 different viruses, one of which was the MLV vaccine, and 4 wild-type viruses that in the sampling which was conducted occupied these amounts of the total space of the virus population. So the green wild type was about 36% of the total number of isolates. Vaccine was 46%, and there were 3 minor populations, genotypes. And over time, one of the populations was completely eliminated. The major population here was almost eliminated, so we see a simplification in the diversity of viruses. And the dominant virus now was a relatively attenuated virus, the MLV offspring from the parental vaccine originally applied. And so again, the question here is, we don't have an answer. We have a question if this phenomenon is reproducible, and if when you see lower complexity and virus diversity, is it easier to maintain control of the situation? So that's really all I have to say about indirect benefits. And in the remaining time, I'd like to just raise some points that I find interesting, either because it makes me look at PERS in a new way where things seem to be happening that I'm not aware of, and in the other case, I have some comments about diagnostics that I think are particularly relevant, where you're going to go through experiences where the frequency of PERS outbreaks becomes less and less. The direct routes of transmission are truly under control. You think the indirect routes are under control, so where is the virus coming from? I find this issue of, and this obviously is data from Dale Polson, this issue of time to negative pigs is extremely interesting. So here Dale is showing data from 2 farms following sow herd outbreaks, and the lines show the percent of, let's see here, percent PCR positives.
Due to when?
To weaning. What's the D?
Due to when? Piglet.
Okay. So percent positive pigs, you see it going down, and during this period, McRebel with no cross-fostering is the management protocol. And the story I always hear is when you get down near 0, the manager says, the pigs look so good, can't we start cross-fostering? I've never seen such good pigs. Why are we losing this opportunity? So the general, who was a little too generous, says, okay, you can start cross-fostering. As soon as you do, in the green here, you see a huge outbreak again in the frequency of positive piglets. And then you have to reinstitute McRebel and wait until you truly go to 0 before you start cross-fostering again. So it tells me that there's a difference immunologically in sows in piglets on their mother versus another mother that still, I assume, is immunologically competent. It must be telling us something about mechanisms of immunity and transmissibility of PERS that we don't understand, and if we do understand it, we'll have better tools and the technical details that will allow us to understand the reasons behind maintaining negative piglets, have better predictability on time to negative pigs. Okay. Now I'd like to close with a couple slides and comments related to diagnostics. One is sensitivity. If you're going through your classifications and you're using PERS PCR as a determinant of stable or unstable herds, one of the things that's really clear to me now is duration of viremia in pigs is age dependent. This is a recently published study showing wild-type fairly virulent virus in weaned pigs, duration of viremia 28 to 35 days, very standard observation. The same virus going into sows that are in their second or third litter, same virus, duration of viremia is 11 days. Okay. So if you go in, and it's much easier then to see PCR negative sows in the same infection paradigm as PCR positive weaned pigs. So there's a large period of time here where you'd say, well, I think these sows are negative. This also shows vaccine virus. Again, duration of viremia is 11 days. In this case, 4 out of the 9 pigs in this study never showed viremia at all. So you get fairly avirulent or low virulent viruses in a sow herd. You might have infections that you cannot see that run under the radar. We know all of these pigs are infected because they all seroconvert. So again, looking in sow herds, you've got clear opportunities now where you could see evidence of, based on PCR, of lack of infection, but seroconversion that raises opportunities for misinterpretation of diagnostic data based on an incomplete understanding of the interaction of PRRS virus in pigs. And part of the take-home message there is that the PCR diagnostics, which are extremely sensitive, we rely on that positive, negative conclusion from the diagnostic lab. There are some real serious potential limitations. Not only is it dependent on virus being in the pigs, there's a limit in the ability of PRRS, of PCR to detect PRRS in a pig. The sample volume, you take a 10 ml serum tube and you send some of that to the D lab, they take a tenth of a mil out for the assay to purify virus. Out of that, they usually test 1/10 of the sample you end up with. So the minimum sensitivity in a pig is 100 DNA copies per mil. If it's 10 copies per mil, that I would consider to be a positive pig. It will always show up as PCR negative. So this example from Colorado where you had PCR negatives in the face of a virus infection could have been due to lack of sensitivity at the animal at the diagnostic level. The reaction's fantastic, but diagnostically there's a limitation. Another well-known issue with PCR is that it's sequence specific, and PCR and PRRS is notorious for changing sequence. Minnesota Diagnostic Lab last December advertised a situation where their PCR test missed a new virus, I think that came out of a boar stud, because of a change in the sequence where the primers bind to initiate the reaction. They redesigned the test. It now catches that virus. Susie Carmen in Manitoba, in response to a similar kind of question on how do you deal with this problem of the virus changing all the time, said, well, she has dozens of primers. And where there's a case where you know that PRRS has to be there and your assay doesn't work, she goes and pulls out more primers looking for ones that will give a positive result. I think we're all familiar with the Dendrograms, which I regard as extremely useful in understanding information about the epidemiology of the virus. Where did it come from? Is this the same damn thing I had before my rollover or my herd closure, which might be interpreted as that not working, versus a new introduction? And knowing the genetic relatedness of the viruses helps give you that information. That But these dendrograms do not help you in knowing if you're going to get effective protection in a vaccination or immunization situation. So they don't work very well to predict immunological relatedness or give you immunologically relevant information. And to fill that gap in knowledge, that need, people have looked at other ways of classifying viruses. One of those is glycotypes. It's well known that envelope glycoprotein 5, the same gene that almost all of the sequencing is based on, has variations in glycosylation. Here we're looking at the 3 glycosylation sites on MLV vaccine. It's assumed that glycosylation influences the ability of immune responses to interact with this protein, and it's assumed that that interaction controls infection. Those are big assumptions that we do not know really are true. But that does not hinder people from trying to use glycotypes as a way of predicting better cross protection. MJ types, I assume everyone is familiar with those. That's based on amino acid sequence in a region of GP5 that, to me, I cannot figure out what kind of immunological relevance there would be here. Whether I think there's relevance here or not is completely irrelevant. If this is a tool that helps and aids people in giving better protection, then let's use it. First, let's figure out if that connection exists. To date, there's no information really looking at whether similar MJ types provide better protection against each other than dissimilar. Darwin Reeks is doing a study now. He'll be reporting at the Lehman Conference that I think will be the first effort to address that issue. Okay, so bottom line, PRRS vaccination may facilitate regional elimination. It may help efforts, particularly in swine-dense region, through reducing environmental loads of virus and simplifying the complexity of virus populations in the area. I'm looking for help from you in understanding what's going on with these train wrecks that occur near the ends of eliminating viruses following sow herd outbreaks when cross-fostering is used. And to me, I think there's a difference in viremic piglets that come from immune sows versus non-immune sows. Recent study we did with Mark Wagner, immune sows where you challenge late in gestation, 39% of the piglets were PCR positive at weaning, and I never saw piglets that looked healthier. They were fantastic. The control sows with no prior immune protection, challenged late in gestation, 10 to 20% of the pigs were still alive at weaning. They were PCR positive, and they were so sick that they had to be euthanized. So these piglets coming from immune sows that are PCR, that appear to be PRRS positive, why do they look so healthy? There's a disconnect between the presence of PRRS in an animal and the expression of disease. And there are fundamental implications if you're sending pigs to nurseries that look fantastic, so you assume that they're PRRS free. If they're carrying PRRS with them, what are the implications? So as usual, I end the talk with more questions than answers, but that's in my hope that Bob will not confront me with even more. Thank you.
So Mike, we think about
I failed.
we think about flu virus. And there's a school of thought in flu virus that vaccination, let's say, of people, encourages the evolution of new types. That if we didn't vaccinate, there wouldn't be a need for the virus to evolve and change. So they're both RNA viruses, flu viruses, PRRS virus. What is it about PRRS virus that makes you think that regional, concentrated vaccination will decrease the evolution of new types as opposed to increase?
Well, you definitely framed the question in a biased way that invites yeah, I've heard that same statement, and the claim is used as a basis for saying that the best. Well, that violates everything that human doctors and veterinarians are trained to do. Your profession is to heal, not to just let nature run its course. So you're obliged to intervene. And even if you don't think you are, your client sure is expecting you to do something. So I think it's part of the answer is, well, this is a straw man. It's an unrealistic situation. In the same case, you don't see any nations or medical associations arguing for no vaccination against influenza. So I guess that's my soapbox answer. My scientific answer is that the evidence that vaccination might be facilitating or accelerating PRRS virus evolution would be evidence that you had selection of viruses that were resistant to the vaccine, escape mutants. And I am not aware, well, I'll say it more strongly because I pay attention to this. There are no examples in the short history of PRRS of a virus that appeared following vaccination which was resistant to immunity induced by the vaccination. That you could take that virus, revaccinate pigs, and infect with that virus, and it was completely protected. There are absolutely no examples whatsoever. And earlier this week, I heard people talking about escape mutants. It's easy to say. It's not only hard to demonstrate. I'd say, as of now, it's impossible to demonstrate. This is a virus which shows very rapid rates of change, and whether that's driven by immunological selection of all types, not just vaccine-based selection, is there's no compelling evidence that that is an important player in driving PRRS virus evolution.
So your answer begs a question for John Paul. You said that we're compelled to do something as veterinarians, and we heard this morning from Ryan that perhaps doing something, out of the gates may not be the best bet. If we're compelled, let's say, from our client's point of view to make some money, John Paul, how do you recommend that veterinarians manage the expectations of producers with regards to vaccine use? What should we be telling producers to expect if we recommend that they use PRRS virus vaccination?
That's a good question, and one that we get every day, and I'm sure you guys get it too. First is to make a distinction between foreign herds or breeding herds and growing populations. So, and then make a distinction on when, where, in what cases vaccine may make sense. And in some cases, with low prevalence or low density, vaccine might not be the best option for that population, at least in a consistent way. So it will be a tool that you can have for a specific time, for a specific action, and then vaccination wouldn't have sense. In other places where the higher prevalence and higher density, so your risk of getting infected is higher, and you need to maintain some level of immunity in your herd, then vaccine makes sense. In those areas, for growing pigs, we can expect, because we have seen that, improvement on performance, and we are right now evaluating how that would affect the other parameters, infection dynamics in those populations. the sow herd question is more complicated, and I would follow Dr. Wagner and Dr. Murtaugh's study that they presented in the ASV. Even 100% homology for PRRS virus produced abortion and viremia in piglets that were exposed later on. So we can't pretend that vaccine would protect 100% of the sows in a population, because even 100% exposure and challenge didn't protect, sterilize, or generate sterilized immunity. So managing expectation is that that herd would have a better response to the potential introduction, but it wouldn't be 100% in some cases.
And I suppose you never know what the implications might have been had you not vaccinated.
No.
So it's hard to
Have those.
know. Robert?
Mike, if you look at this table, the results that were obtained for pigs that were challenged 35 to 56 days after vaccination, they seem to be quite a bit better than those that are obtained when the pigs were challenged 21 or 28 days after vaccination. Is there an immunological basis to that, or not really?
Go ahead and restate that question if you would.
Sure, thank you. Robert is pointing out that if you look at the time interval between vaccination and challenge, it looks like the longer you wait, the better your protection. So if we pick a bad example, 28 days here, you saw or 21 days in number 14, 30% lung lesions in vaccinated, 36% in controls. So that's a statistically significant benefit, but it's not very impressive. If you wait 56 days, you get almost 100% protection. So it implies that the longer you wait, the better the immunity that you get. But if you wait 120 days, you've got 37% here. So if you take a case-by-case, example-based analysis, you cannot account for all of the results. And there's really not enough data here to look at a correlation. And in PRRS, I'm usually very unimpressed by correlations, because you can get statistically significant correlations, but if you ask how much of the variation is explained by the correlation, it's usually only 10 or 20%. So that says that 80% of what's going on is explained by other things. So I'm not willing to grant your point that there might be a benefit to waiting a longer period of time, because I'm not convinced that we know enough to really be able to attribute that to something we know about.
Follow up?
Yeah. I excluded the 120-day challenge.
He excluded.
Yeah, I did. So between 35 and 56 days, then you had 6 studies, and all of these studies...
Between 35 and 60 days.
Between 35 and 56 days. You have 6 studies there, and in all of them, the reduction seems to be
really good.
Really good.
Really good.
So you don't think that there is an immunological explanation for that? It's just luck.
It's just luck.
Okay.
These guys are baiting me. It is one of the ways you can make this look better is cherry pick what you like, and then show it.
It's not that I like
No.
it. I just want to see whether or not there is.
We have no immunological knowledge that would allow us to say that there is a mechanistic basis for a great benefit that happens in the window of time from 35 to 56 days, and not earlier and not later.
But you would agree, at some point, the immune response maxes out and diminishes after that. You're just saying we don't know what that point is.
Well...
I mean, that's the truth. There's no doubt about it.
No, it's not true. Now, my story that I've given in the past, and I try not to change my story too much because I can't remember which one's which, is that once a pig has seen PRRS, it's substantially immune to another PRRS virus. If that's true, that means that there's no difference between 1 week and 1 year. But you're the last group of people I try and convince that that statement should be taken at face value. So we do not know what the mechanism of protection is. We assume it's based on B cells and T cells that have memory. It has to be, because everything we know about immunology says that's true. But no one has been able to prove it yet for PRRS in pigs. So
We'll talk about it on the way home.